Hello and welcome to the Terminal Velocity Comic Book Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott.
And I'm Andrew.
And on today's episode, we're going to talk about Amazing Spider-Man. As you can see from Andrew's art, if you're watching the YouTube, and if not, you probably saw it from the actual album art that's in your podcatcher. And I'm not quite sure why I introduced this like an episode of Sesame Street. Today's episode is brought to you. So in any case, that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to specifically be talking about Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man. The ups and downs, the consistency we can get into. We're going to kind of kick it off from where the story's at right now, what our feelings are about it, and then go into kind of a rant about how much we love Spider-Man and kind of what's working for us and what's not. So this run started a couple of years ago, at least now. I didn't look into the exact start of the run date. Just trying to go off of kind of the number of issues that have gone out. And I know the issue count is probably problematic because we've had so many dot issues. We've had so many celebrations of what it would be if they were doing consistent numbering versus new numbering.
I especially liked number 8. I think it was 800 and followed by number 50.
Yeah.
It was
awesome. where they do things like this. That kind of stuff really bothers me about what Marvel does. Just if you want to have legacy numbering, just go back to the legacy numbering and get on with it.
Irish comics in general would just go back to legacy numbering.
So do I.
I think when you just have the constant reboots, it makes everything feel like it doesn't matter. Like I for me as a kid growing up and collecting, like it was a big deal for me to find Amazing Spider-Man, 372 or whatever, 293, whichever issue it was that I don't recall now, but it was something to know that there was this whole history that you could go back and find out about, but like you're kind of stepping in at this point in the chapter of its story.
Yeah.
And then to constantly now where it's like everything's reset by the time it hits like, triple digits is like not really a thing anymore.
I know it's bothersome.
Unless they get there close, then they want to push out that anniversary issue, then they do. But like this series, I suspect we'll get to that at least the triple digit before they reboot it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping they don't reboot it. I just want to see continue. But
well, that's the thing. I mean, the story itself isn't like it's been a huge departure from what came before it necessarily. They're building to something which has been 10 plus years in the making, which I think we can talk about right now. Is Spencer's run has always been alluding to and dancing on the footsteps or doorstep, I should say, of Brand New Day, and repercussions that have come from that and everything like that. So it would be nice for them to just have that legacy numbering so that you could, even though that story actually came across like 3 or 4 different titles, but like to have that legacy numbering attached to it, I think would add a little bit more weight to what they're trying to potentially do with repairing, explaining whatever he's building to with that whole thing. And that's kind of my feeling about it, is that they're giving that story the gravitas now that it was kind of missing. And the nerd and the completionist part of you and the comic book kind of grumpy guy, nerd guy inside you is just like, well, wouldn't it make more sense if it was this related to Amazing Spider-Man, 600 and something? Like to have that editor's note call back to that specific issue instead of it being volume 4 issue number 24 of this title. It would just be cool to have that through line, like you say, so that completionist part of you and that collector part of you could be like, yeah, I now need to go back and collect this 4 issue chunk.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like the previous run with Dan Slott's run, which went on for like I think a decade or so. They like ended at like 801 or something like that, and then we got a brand new number 1, and then now like recently we had it's still issue 49, right? But they build it as issue 850, and like I know Marvel's kind of had the cheat the cheat where it's like, oh, here's the new numbering plus the legacy numbering, and I just think that like it's a half step, and I appreciate it that it's there, but like they
Mhm.
really just got to drop this new numbering stuff. Like just
Yeah.
1 month, just restore all the numbers. Like it honestly means something. Now it's like I think that yes, you do get those artificial sales spikes with issue one, but I really feel like it's never gonna last.
Hmm.
And I think you're shorting the each character short by like taking away its legacy and its history. I I think now, especially with the market, I think that people are now kind of well versed with most of the main characters. I don't think anyone who's gone to see the latest Marvel movies like, oh, I can't get into Spider-Man because it's issue 852. I think that it like I said, it provides a challenge for them to go look back at the history
Hmm.
and to Karen, like now when you look back at the history, it's like you got to go which one.
Yeah. Yeah. And it definitely builds it into what you were talking about, I think, in our last episode of this is turning comics into kind of anthology chunks as opposed to that consistent storyline. And it's one of the reasons, and maybe I'm talking myself into now having this anthology thing, but it's one of the things about Marvel in particular. They pick and choose their, as we've seen, their continuity that they like and that they don't like, and they ignore things. So having them chunked out by this kind of new numbering at least lets them say, this is the set of rules that I'm playing with in this storyline. And just to be devil's advocate, I guess that's maybe one reason why having some different numbering works versus having the big, long, extended run is that they're then able to say, kind of in that Elseworlds type of perspective, this is now only dealing with ramifications of this particular storyline. But I think there's other ways around that. There's probably two camps that you can go in. Either
It's
you
called
like
it's
the
called promoting story arcs. Like,
it is, yeah, and that's what they used to do. So it's, I don't know. It's just one of those things that, like I say, we're of an age where we're like, I want to have my legacy numbering. I want to know that we're hitting these actual milestones. And for
take a look
God's
at
sakes, just get rid of the dot numbering. If they could at least get rid of the dot numbering, I would be a lot happier as well.
I just wish I understood the dot numbering, like dot
Yeah.
HU and dot LR. Like, if they're not worthy enough parts to be in the mainline numbering of the storyline, even, or it's like they're not quite a separate mini series. Like how like events always have like kind of the
Hmm.
side books and everything, but they're not quite a full issue yet either. And but charge the same price as a full issue.
Hmm.
I like I don't understand it. Like if it's important to the story, then it should be part of the numbered sequence. And if it's not, then why does it exist?
And I'll say, I don't think I don't think this particular run has had two, outside of the most recent storyline with the .lr. Um, has it had a lot of the dot numberings?
We had the hunted storyline, which had about
Yeah.
3 or 4 of the dot issues. And then upcoming now, instead of the dot issues, there seems to be one shots that tie into the storylines.
Right.
So there's a one shot that wraps up like the Kingpin story, and then apparently there's a one shot that's going to wrap up a newly started Chameleon story.
Right.
And I'm just like, again, why? Like it's like it's again, I think it's tied into some kind of numbering scheme that they've got planned. Whether it's a milestone issue that's timed for a certain time
Hmm.
or a planned reboot, who knows? But they want to hit a certain number at a certain place, and at the same time, it's like, are they counting these towards
Yeah.
the
See,
numbering for
that's
the
that's the
milestone? Like
thing I'm
directly,
unclear about.
they don't really like they don't address them as having the milestone number. No, frankly, I haven't done my research. I haven't looked and seen if they've consistently kept the same legacy numbering through and through, or if they've included these other side books. Like we know when they're trying to get like a character like Black Cat or something and say, oh, it's issue
Yeah.
50, they count like every and anything that ever had Black Cat printed on it.
Hmm.
to get to that milestone. And that's just an example. But that seems to be the case.
Yeah, they seem to have been doing it. I guess it's more of a pain point because they've done it so much recently with the .lr. There was so many of those dot issues. Um, outside of the dot
Without that,
issues, though,
without LR on that, and this time I actually kind of read them, and because usually if I see the .lr, I just kind of my mind just skips over them. Uh, they, for the most part, were like a steady line for the storyline, so I didn't understand. Other than the
yeah,
fact that they kind of scaled back Spider-Man's involvement in the actual issues, and maybe that's the idea, is that it's like it's a side issue because it's not primarily focused on Spider-Man in that issue. But
hmm
that used to just be part of the story, just
yeah. I
used
was
to be
gonna
an issue.
say they used to just run the issue, and if Spider-Man
So
was in it a lot, he was in it a lot, and if he wasn't, he wasn't.
like
But
it's not
this,
like in a TV show, you when you have an episode about Pa Kent, it's like you're not like calling it Smallville .5 or point
hmm
dot whatever, and it doesn't count as one of the episodes of the show. It, I don't know.
I don't know. Outside of the dot numbering thing that's bothered us, though, the I would say that Nick Spencer's run has been very consistent in its quality from issue
Mhm.
one. It's, and this is going to sound terrible. It's never been a book that's blown me away, but it's a book that you're consistently going back to and being like, well, that was a satisfying book. Even
It's
the most recent issue, I want to point this one out, even the most recent issue where it was the new costume and the reasons behind the new costume, and kind of the ridiculousness that is, and the storyline, I'm not behind it, the changes that they're making to the costume where anybody can be Spider-Man, type of thing through this new technology. I read the articles and then I read the issue. And at the end of the articles, I was like, oh, that's going to be terrible. And at the end of the issue, I was like, I was actually fairly satisfied with that. I don't like this part of the story, but it was told really well.
you know what? Like one of the things that I feel like I'm going to say one thing is that I think you're right about what you're saying with this book. It is consistent. It's one of those Marvel books or in comic books in general that it's middling, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it's like it's never horrible. It's never great. Like we haven't had that moment where it's like, oh yes, this is the Spider-Man moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's constantly feeling like it's building up to it, and we just haven't got there yet. It's not like he hasn't had that Hydra Cap moment, and I
Yeah.
feel like he's still building towards something, and I can't quite figure it out. Um, at the same time, I think he's trolling us.
Yes.
I think that like one of the things that I really enjoy about this series is that it's first it's teasing us about fixing or undoing one more day, a brand new day, like that whole situation. And I mean that's the draw for me. I
Mm-hmm.
tuned out of Spider-Man for a long time after One More Day. Like that just killed the book for me. For me, like I grew up with a married Spider-Man from the onset, so it was a very jarring change, and I couldn't understand why they wanted to. It was essentially like they said they had troubles telling stories like that were fresh and new with Spider-Man, but all they wanted to do was just have him sleep with other people, like basically.
Mm-hmm.
And like that, like they're the stories that they ended up telling, they could have done with the married component. Like it didn't really need that part. So when like they're teasing, like they brought Mary Jane back into the book, and it's like they're back in a committed relationship, and they have the little hints of something going on, like in relation to One More Day, and it's been peppered throughout the series. I think we're being trolled a little bit with that, with our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of playing around with that, but I also find that the series also I find that it also harkens back to like classic Spider-Man, if that makes any sense. Like he's kind of taking characters kind of back to basics in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like like it's like he has the Craven storyline, and he's got I mean he's now doing Chameleon. He's got J. Jonah Jameson, classic yet new, if that makes any sense. Like
Yep.
it's like so the twist on Jameson now is now he's an ally, right? Which was something that Slott kind of pushed in that direction, but this Spencer's kind of expanded upon it, and I feel like he's giving us that like old school classic run of Spider-Man feeling like it's just a kind of a I'm on the verge of articulating what I'm trying to say. But it's basically like the old kind of like serialized
Hmm.
drama series that would just go on and on and on from the classic runs of Spider-Man. I think that they also brought Bagley in because they're also trying to channel that 90s pre-clone era,
Hmm.
um, Amazing Spider-Man. And that part of it I appreciate, but I do think he's trolling us.
I think he's trolling us too, and I would agree with that. That he's definitely, even from the last couple issues where he's teasing more about the Mephisto aspect and bringing things in, and then he's got issues where it's not there at all. So
Yeah.
he's really pacing it, like you say, to tease you and get you in, and kind of. I think what's good about it is that he's instilling the classic fun, even though he's got the drama, and even though Spider-Man's life is consistently turning to shit. Um, he's got the Parker luck, and that plays against him in every turn. But he's bringing the fun in each issue, so which is something that I appreciate. Even like I say, when I read this most recent issue, I don't necessarily like the new costume with the new technology behind it, but it was a fun issue.
Well,
It
see, and I
had,
think that's part of where he's trolling us is like they used to kind of throw these kind of like one-off suits
yeah,
at us, and it would be like, promoted on the cover, and that's kind of like what they're doing here. It's gonna be gone in an issue too.
yeah, it's
Like
not going to
it's not.
last,
So
but
it's kind of like the Spidey armor from like Web
yeah,
of Spider-Man. Like it's like kind of like, yeah, here's a cool new thing that it's not gonna last.
yeah, yeah.
It's not a
So
black suit. It's not.
yeah, exactly. But it's, yeah, his consistency there has been really great. One aspect that we haven't had the consistency on, that you and I were talking about just before we started recording, has been in the art front. This isn't to say that this series has had bad art, because that's very much not true. This series has had very good art, from issue one all the way through. I can't pick out a specific run where I was like, oh, I didn't enjoy the art on this one. It's just that they've had different artists every other issue, or every other storyline, or every other few issues, even if it was within the same storyline. It hasn't had that level of consistency. And I think that's one of the things, this is a Marvel problem in general, but this is one of those things where, much like the legacy numbering, I wish that they would just have a consistent artist on the
we
books.
we don't seem to get that in comics in general anymore. It's like it's even though the kind of the what we would kind of think of as the epic run of like a modern creative team, it's not typically a one writer, one artist. It's one
Mm-hmm.
writer and a stable of artists.
It doesn't
Uh,
happen a lot, but when it
it,
does happen, it elevates the storyline, because I'm thinking of Jason Aaron and Russell Dodderman on the Mighty Thor, and it was like that. Just, it gives you that through line of that consistency in storytelling and art, and the art is part of the storytelling. So when you
I
have
totally agree.
when you have that consistency, it just elevates the entire book going straight through. So
Well, we get it now for 6 issues, and
I
then
know, and
shaken up again, and it's like,
maybe that's part of the whole anthology stuff that they're doing, where it's just this chunk is relatable because it's just this. But even then, they don't always keep the same artists through. Like, I'm thinking about the Hunted storyline, where they had two or three different artists running through that one, and the art wasn't bad in any means,
the problem
during
is I
any of
think
those.
Amazing Spider-Man could be a stronger book if it wasn't bi-weekly. I think
Yes.
that they could have a consistent artist, and they could have see, Marvel, I think, is determined to get us back to that era where we had 4 Spider-Man titles essentially running, or at least the equivalent of 4 titles. And then something similar to like what DC does with Batman. It's just
Yeah.
like, but I think that the book is always going to kind of be middling because it's always kind of trying to get issues out. And every two, like I said, if it was just a monthly book, they could spend just that little bit of extra time to kind of polish it up and
Hmm.
make to tell a stronger story each issue. Um, Unfortunately, I don't think that that's ever going to go back that way.
No, I don't think
Whereas,
so
like, I
either.
look at a book like Daredevil, which unfortunately, doesn't have the greatest sales. It has consistent sales. I think it's kind of plateaued around the 30,000 units area, which is in Marvel terms danger of reboot issue number one territory. But like that has been a consistent. It's been, I think every issue of that series is solid. Uh, the artists, it doesn't quite have the solid artist. It has Mark Chichetto. I apologize if I got that name wrong. And then it alternates with one other artist usually. But it's like kind of primarily that same team. And I thought that's what we were getting with Amazing Spider-Man with Otley, but he's now left the book, and I guess he's I think he's doing some covers occasionally, but that was the promise of this book, was that it was going to be Nick Spencer and Ryan Otley, and then after the first couple issues, it was like it became clear that's not what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I do think that the art is a huge component of a book, and when it doesn't have like that same, I find that a lot of times they get a drastically different artist too, so it doesn't have that consistent feel. Whereas I find like a DC book, typically, even when they shuffle the artists, they try to keep it in that same kind of style.
Yeah.
Just so that the tone matches. But
yeah, and you can see that in some of these most recent issues. Like, I love Gleason's art. His art's fantastic, and he's the artist right now doing, or at least he was in this most recent issue. And you can see it's got some of the darker tones going through it, which is part of the story and whatnot. But then if you're shifting to a Mark Bagley, it's a very different art style. It's a very different color palette. It's just a different tone that comes from the art in general. So it can take you in and out of the story depending on what's actually going on. So, but yeah, like the reason we wanted to talk about Spider-Man is because we're like, did you read Spider-Man this week? Yeah, it was pretty good. and that's what it comes down to. We're always like, yeah, it's a good title. It's one of those ones that is worthy of being in your weekly pull lists. And I say weekly because eventually the title is going to come out weekly. It's there, and it's a consistent kind of good read. It's a palate cleanser between some other books that you might be like, oh, that one was shit, that one was fantastic, and then it's like,
let's
oh,
hit the reset here. I still love comics. Let's like reset the tone here for me.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me wrong. Yeah, we love comics. And this is one of those comics that we're happy to be reading because it's got this consistent story quality to it. We're just complaining that it's the numbering and the art doesn't have that consistency, but the art has always been great. Depending on what artist they're using, the art has always been a great factor in the book. It's just, we just want one artist. We want it to be Nick Spencer and fill in the blanks run on Spider-Man was fantastic and was really good. And that's why you need to collect these 4 volumes type of thing.
I have to say that Spider-Man, like my pull list has drastically changed at various points during the time that we've run this podcast. Nick Spencer's Spider-Man run was kind of starting up around the same time that we were starting up our show, so it's kind of always been part of it. It's one of maybe 2 titles that have never been considered to be dropped from my list.
Yeah.
And I've gone from collecting 20 books a month to 2. And this book has remained on that list that entire time.
Yeah.
There was a time I was actually couldn't wait to get the next issue per se, so I would even buy it digitally just so I could read it. Even though I knew I had my physical copy with a free digital code in it, you know. It's just one of those titles that it reminds me of why I love comics. It's the joy of storytelling for me. I love, I think he's trolling us, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. He's playing with our expectations in a fun way. Especially he knows he set like his own kind of standards for like what with his run on Cap, where everyone's expecting that Hydra moment or Hail Hydra moment. I'm not even sure that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think he's telling a strong, consistent storytelling of Spider-Man, and that's the part that I enjoy most. I do think he has an end game. I think he knows where he's ultimately leading the character. whether that sticks the landing, we'll see.
Mm-hmm. He's been sticking it so far. He's been sticking his story point so far. So I have every confidence that it's going to have a satisfying resolution. I think.
Well, we have to go into spoiler territory because I have to ask your opinion on Kindred. This is the one, I guess, story thread that's been there since the beginning, the very promise, the very first issue, I
Very,
believe.
the very slow
Yes.
story thread.
So
That is,
this
I
thread
wish
is
this part of the
interwoven.
story had been a little faster, but yes,
Well,
this really
it only took what 60
for
some odd issues to reveal the identity of Kindred.
something like that.
Which, you know what, again is harkening back to the old classic runs, like when you didn't know who Green Goblin was or Hobgoblin. It's like you just this
Mhm.
mysterious figure in the background, and that I appreciate. Like I think one thing that was really cool that most fans don't have with the characters like Green Goblin anymore is like there was a time you didn't know who it was,
Yeah,
and it was like this kind of mysterious character. There was no you didn't know it was Norman Osborn. That was like kind of like a
yeah,
holy crow moment.
yeah.
Um, spoilers, the reveal that Kindred was Harry.
But
I think we all kind of were gearing towards that. We just didn't understand how because of how Harry
yeah,
was presented since Brand New Day. It was like he's presented as like the happy innocent, never was the Green Goblin type iteration of the character, even right up until the last time we saw him.
mhm,
And then it's like the full reveal that Harry is Kindred, and it's like I guess that's going to be part of the story is how that came to be, and I don't know if it's through the manipulations of Mephisto has caused like him to become the second off entity version. For a moment, I was wondering: is there two Harrys? Is there still the one that we saw as like his friend and everything throughout since he came back, and then
yeah.
there's like this entity version of him that's like demonic? And it doesn't appear to be the case. It appears that he is in fact just Harry Osborn. So don't know. Maybe that's the little hook that he's got for us to keep coming back each every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel about that one. Like I say, it was a real slow build and a slow reveal that kind of
Mhm.
happened for that. Um, I like the new villain, like the character of Kindred. I like the creepy power set, like that kind of aspect to him. He's got the little demonic bug things. It's Spider-Man, who's all about spiders. So like I like that kind of that playing off of things where it's still in that kind of bug realm.
Mm.
Um, I like that. I don't know if I like that it's Harry Osborn. Um, but at the same time, much like the suit, it's when I hear the storyline, I have more of a visceral reaction. When I read the storyline, I get behind it better.
It's almost like you should give things a chance before you make a
Yeah,
judgment.
yeah, it's like I shouldn't judge the book by its cover, but and that it's the dumbest thing to say, but it's true. That's very much what this his run has been like. You can hear the story points and think, "Oh, that's stupid. That's really lame." But once you read it, you're like, "Okay, that's actually it's explained at least in a satisfying way."
Mhm.
So I have every confidence that the explanation we're going to get is going to be satisfying. Whether I still get behind that full part of the story, I don't know. Um, but that's kind of my feelings on the Spider-Man book in general is you hear some of it and you think, oh, that's lame. And then you get behind the story and you're like, actually, that was really fun. Like the Hunted storyline where Arcade is in it with Craven stuff. You think, oh, that's going to be really stupid. All these people can just wear the technology and be so and so. But then when you read it, you're like, actually, that's played out fairly well. I like how he constructed that. I like the story points that he put in. I like the conflict that it introduced amongst heroes and villains and everything like that.
I hated Hunted on paper,
Exactly. It
and
sounded really lame. But when you were reading it, you were like, I actually like this storyline.
like made the Craven his backstory work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for a moment I forgot about Arcade being in that, and I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah,
He's the
like
character I like.
he's brought in that
Yeah,
those
I
classic
enjoyed.
callbacks to his stories, and he's made it work. So I think what he's going to do with Kindred is going to work for us.
Mhm.
Um, whether we're on paper again, whether on paper we're like, oh, that's stupid or that's fantastic, well, is still to be seen. But I have every confidence in Nick Spencer's writing ability on this one. I wasn't a fan of necessarily the what he did on Captain America stuff, but he's got the tone, he's got the legacy, and he's got the respect for the character. And like you say, he's clearly got this mapped out. He's trolling people wherever he can. He's having fun with the audience, is really what he's doing.
Yeah,
He's having good fun with the audience, and he's having great fun with the character. Um, so I do feel like it's going to be a worthwhile story by the end of it. It's just going to take us a hell of a long time to get to it.
yeah. We got to get to issue 900, right? So, I there's one part that irks me about this about his run, and it's not his fault. It's an editorial thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is Mayor Fisk, and
Yes.
it's like, where do you find the consistent when you if you read this book alone, it's fine. Like it's got that story with Fisk going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're reading Daredevil and you're reading the other books where Fisk is also the mayor, but it's like the tone and the voice of the character is very different.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in Spider-Man, he's like, "Oh, Spider-Man's my best friend, and he's working for justice." And then over in Daredevil, he's banned vigilantes in New York.
Yeah.
And, and then there's like a hint of like a higher power that's more powerful than the mayor and kingpin of crime altogether. Like there's this rich elite that's really running the show. And I'm just like, you guys have to kind of work together because it doesn't make any sense where like he's got a
Yeah.
pro Spider-Man campaign over in this book, but over here he's got this anti-vigilante. There'll be no masks in New York kind of thing going on.
In my mind, I've always put it to the Wilson Fisk as mayor is the equivalent of Lex Luthor as president. Neither one of those things makes any sense in comics, and
I
they should
guess
just dissolve them.
I know they've probably explained it somewhere, and I'm not remembering or forgetting. But it's like, have we forgotten his prison stints? His like very public outing as the kingpin of crime.
Yeah.
Uh, did New York just say, "We forgive you"?
Yeah. It
You brought us
comics.
jobs.
It's one of those things where that, like I say, it brings in that parallel for me, and I'm just like, no, I
But
don't
then
buy
again, Matt
it.
Murdock has been mayor too, so in this universe.
This is true. So
Um, I have to ask you another thing, and this is a recent development. How do you feel about a rehabilitated Norman Osborn?
I don't like it. I I don't, there's a couple things that I don't like how overplayed Osborne is getting and has
Mhm.
been for decades now. Basically, since they revealed him as the Green Goblin and brought him back as the Green Goblin, he's just been overplayed.
Mhm.
He's never been, in my mind, controversial. He's never been that interesting of a character to begin with. Green Goblin's a cool character. Norman Osborn himself as a character is not that interesting. So I know that's why they always go back to the Green Goblin well on him. And he's always, oh, he's turned his life around and now he's had some kind of break and he's back as the bad guy. It's just too overplayed for me. So I would love us to step away from Green Goblin for a while, in the same way that I feel like the Joker's getting overplayed in Batman books. Like you have to. Ooh, I know it's a controversial opinion, but it's one of those better in small doses, and so it
Yes.
really needs to be in small doses.
Fair,
So
fair enough. I kind of am liking that he's been like forced rehabilitated through like the spiritual means. Uh, like I maybe it'll be revealed he's actually still playing them, but like I kind of enjoy this element because he'll never be trusted. But I like the idea of him trying to be trusted, I guess, if that makes any sense. Like I'm kind of digging that concept more than I thought I would have. Because
mm-hmm.
when I first saw it, I was like, again, like just hearing about it, and I was like, oh man, like this is this never work. It's working for me. um, but it's because it feels different, it feels new for the character. Like I feel like he has genuinely been forced to be good,
Hmm.
and it's not like a Suicide Squad situation where like it's like he's good or else. Like I feel like he's literally been stripped of that whole Green Goblin persona, and maybe maybe Harry becomes Green Goblin after all this, or maybe they both die, or maybe who knows? Like I could speculate for hours.
Hmm.
Um, but that part I'm kind of happy with. I'm surprised. I wonder if this book, the series, will ever address like an issue that I've always wanted to understand. What's up with their hairstyle, and
Yeah.
why does
What?
the Sandman also have the same hairstyle? Are they related?
Yeah. Yeah. What is it? A
But
style? Is it a
it's a very unique.
texture? Is it is it the color? Like
Does it
what is?
represent curls? Is it just like they have layers of like rows of different colors? Like I would love to know.
That is a great point. Maybe they can tackle it in the movies and really explain because it makes no sense. I don't get it. I've always kind of just equated it to it's a texture thing. It's some
Yeah.
kind of curl that they're trying to say, but it doesn't make any sense. It looks like no human hair.
So I love that it's still consistent to this day. It's still there. So
Yeah. That's
so
awesome.
let's say do you have any predictions for the book for moving forward,
Well, he
or
said
maybe predictions, or even just wishes or hopes?
I have hopes that they erase that problematic storyline and just get um Spidey back to the married realm or get him back down that road. That it'll be another milestone issue where they can say, "Oh, Spider-Man's married." It'll be the biggest wedding of the century type of thing, and get the sales bump from having him remarried and resetting that kind of storyline. That's just really what I'm hopeful for. I'm along for the ride. He said back when he started the title that he's done a lot of reading and he's done his history and it's going to be a callback to the fun Spider-Man stuff, and he's given that. So I'm not speculating on much of anything else other than it's just going to be fun. And I hope that consistency stays. So those are my two hopes, that the consistency sticks and that we have a satisfying resolution to that problematic storyline.
That's a good statement. I would agree with you. Um, yeah, I wanted to just I do want this to resolve one more day. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's something that Marvel needs to address. Like, how do you have your key character here that's supposed to appeal to both young and old, and you have them tainted by this like deal with the devil type thing that, frankly, like I it just baffles me still.
Yeah.
They didn't want to show divorce or separation. But I mean, this is the same people that blew Mary Jane up in a plane crash to get rid of her
Mm-hmm.
for with Burns year one type reboot they tried, and or had their baby like miscarried or kidnapped by Norman Osborn. We've still never really found out whatever happened to baby May.
Mm-hmm.
um, and yet it's like it's a reality of life. So like if you wanted them to separate, then have them separate and
Mm-hmm.
move on. Like, it's comics. You don't have to sit there and have 6 years of him moping about his divorce.
Yeah.
You can play with time. You can jump ahead. Or tell the story. But like this like supernatural means to like reset everything was just very odd.
Yeah. It's interesting that they decided that having the devil involved is better than just having some judicial paperwork handled. Like an American legal will kit was worse to have than literally the devil getting involved in your marriage.
Yeah, and a character like Spider-Man of
Yeah.
all things,
Yeah.
very strange choice. But yeah, I just hope it stays consistent. I hope it stays fun. I hope they do approach new types of storytelling. I mean I enjoy, like I said, the Norman Osborn as an ally is interesting. I think J. Jonah Jameson as an ally and like a friend. Like he's almost like he tries to be like the best friend to Spider-Man, which is such a flip, and I love that. Um, I hope that I hope that these are long-standing changes that don't just go away. Like
Mhm.
I think that they're strong enough changes that can just be the status quo moving forward. They're not something that you have to kind of reset the clock on.
Yeah.
So Green Goblin, I think it'd be interesting to have a new Green Goblin, appear, and it has nothing to do with Norman. And then Spider-Man has to turn to him for insight. Like it's like I think that would be an interesting story to tell. Like if you want to still use the Green Goblin as a character, which I think they could honestly retire. There's enough Goblin characters.
Hmm.
They don't need to really go back to that well. But if they do, I think that it would be interesting to have Norman as like a positive force, which I think is something that nobody would expect.
Fair enough. Okay. So I think that's a great spot for us to kind of end this episode is kind of on those what our future expectations are. If anybody else has any comments about what their expectations are, feel free to send them to us in an email at terminalvelocitypodcast@gmail.com or leave them in the comments of your podcatcher or on our website, terminalvelocitypodcast.com. Um, get in touch with us that way and let us know what your thoughts are.
If you feel like Marvel should go back to legacy numbering only, or just keep rebooting at number one, just tweet us over at Comics Terminal on Twitter.
All right. So until next week, we will see you later.
Sure.